Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of In the Dark. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, immediately picking up after the events of last episode, Murphy is going right to work, and she has Jess inside of her head being like, oh, like, yesterday you couldn't, like, you were begging me to come back, now you want me to leave you alone. It's like, yeah, kind of everyone's left you alone. But obviously, it's like, this Jess in her head is her subconscious. So she asks these questions like, right, Max convinced Felix to get rid of you. Like, what did he say to convince Felix to kind of decide to, like, put you in the, like, trunk and, like, try to get you across the border? I mean, it's like, also that Max can have some place to bang it out with Leslie. The argument could be made that maybe there's some truth to that, but there's also the thing of, yeah, Max actually legitimately still does care about you. So it was a situation of you out of anybody would get it the worst. Like, you were directly connected to Mia's body. Like, all the evidence ties back to you specifically. So they would probably get in trouble in certain regards, but Murphy would have the book thrown at her. So he agreed with Felix of wanting to, like, protect her because he does care about her. He was sincere about the hug and everything, like, see you later, because regardless of anything, he does care about it. But you could see why Murphy would think that. Like, it isn't just Jess is just a manifestation of her subconscious saying all the things that she's thinking somewhere in the back of her mind. Even to the point people start putting money near her, and it's like, oh my God, your friends have abandoned you. Well, you kind of have no one right now. You have no friends right now because you kind of pissed everybody off and no one knows where you're at and yada, yada, yada. But then on top of that, then you add on top of that, like, people think you're homeless, and she's laughing. And I love that whole thing of, thank you, sir. Like, oh my God, he's so nice. You should be more like him. It's just like, this kind of mean-spirited Jess, once again, it's a manifestation, because Jess will be the one person who'll tell, call Murphy out on her BS. So, like, of course, her subconscious would choose that person, plus that's the person she's missing the most right now. It's her way of keeping Jess alive. So, there's that. But she ends up tracking down the friend because she also can't get in contact with Trey because she doesn't know that Trey couldn't find his phone because his phone was at the crime scene and he's basically running away from a triple homicide that he's being blamed for. So there's all that. She doesn't know that's going on. So she ends up tracking down tracking down Jennifer Walker's friend, and it turns out like this friend is saying the same thing that the quote-unquote uncle. Once again, I guess maybe that really legitimately is her uncle because we find out her brother is in rehab. But, like, I'm just not too keen on, like, this whole, like, the fact is that the uncle said the same thing as the friend, like, oh, it's suicide. It just seems a little too rehearsed because it is interesting because, like, the mom is the only one who believes that there's more going on here. But for, the friend and the uncle to immediately go down there would be like, oh, she's troubled. Because they use that exact phrasing, like, they never went into the specifics. They were just saying, like, she was troubled and she was and she most likely committed suicide. Like, the fact is that both of them said that made me go, I don't know. Like, plus the mom not believing that, but it could just be like a mom who just wants to know, I want to believe the best. I don't want to believe the worst about my child. So, like, I'm going to, I want to believe my daughter's out there holding out hope. So maybe that could be the difference. Because the friend is like, oh yeah, I was looking into it for years. But then it's just kind of like, why did you stop? She claims, like, the reason why Murphy's doing what she's doing. And she's like, because it's the same thing I was doing. By working on this, I can convince myself that, you know, Jennifer was still alive. And kind of like, you're doing the same thing. But she's like, no, it's not the same. Because Jess actually is alive. She's like, I hope so. And interestingly enough, the moment she starts breastfeeding, and it's still this awkward thing of like, right, can you call someone for me? Because of her phone. Because she's like, I don't have anyone's phone number memorized. And she's like, well, there's one person. I'm like, who is it? It didn't cross my mind that it would be her mom, which makes perfect sense. Of course, that'd be the one person whose number you got memorized because the other numbers are programmed into your phone and they're new numbers as, like, you know, everyone's new identities and stuff. I mean, to be fair, Felix was calling her, but she kept ignoring him because it's like, right, like, you're pissed at me right now. I'm pissed at you. Doubly so because you and Max conspired to, like, manipulate me like that. Plus, you abandoned me, so yeah, I'm not going to. But the sad thing is, Felix was pissed. He stormed off, but then he eventually went back because he's like, right, I'm trying to find you, like, because I was wrong for doing what I did, and now it's like Murphy's gone, so he's worried about her. So ultimately, he believes like Murphy's going to get arrested sooner or later. So what I'm going to do is we're going to, like, work together, like, already prepare our defense for Murphy because eventually she will get arrested, and we need to be like having a proper defense in preparation for her. So there's that side of things. But circling back to it. She kind of feels like she has no one because she's also ostracizing herself to a certain extent because she pissed some people off. In particular, she said something, which even Max was like, what did Murphy say that pissed you off so much? He's like, it doesn't, oh, you know, Murphy. It's like, he didn't want to go into the specifics because it was already embarrassing enough the first time, because it would also be him admitting like he cares for Murphy. It's beyond just like her normal like jabs at him. This was personal because he actually has very strong feelings for Murphy, and she basically, let's just keep it frank, she basically shit on him. She ripped out his heart and just like took a massive shit on it in that regard. Granted, she was pissed, so that's why she was lashing out. But once Murphy lashes out, she can get super personal, and she used whatever ammunition was in the clip, and bam, fired. To both her detriment and Felix's. But like I said, he kind of put that aside. I was like, damn it, I shouldn't have done that. And went back for her, but it was already too late. She'd already left. But yeah, her mom picking her up was interesting. It's like, because I think hearing that woman with her child made Murphy, you know, in that moment, she's scared, alone. She doesn't have anyone she can really turn to or rely on right now. So it's like, you know, considering the circumstances, I think a lot of people would call their mom in that situation. Because, like, who would you turn to in a situation where you feel like you have no one else to turn to but your parent, you know? And, because I'm sure, she, you know, like, at least she's had other people around her that could appease some of that loneliness and scare. I mean, it's kind of interesting because, like, she didn't call her mom under the circumstances of, you know, when she was alone, couldn't meet up with Jess then. Like, in episode 3, she never called her mom, but this is, like, a very desperate situation, especially because now it's a thing of, like, I know Jess is missing, and I need to get out of here as quickly as possible. But her mom, it's like, there's something up here. She's like, no, the Appalachian Trail. It's like, no, I've never seen you hike once. The fact of the matter is, like, that's in one particular direction. The fact is, I find you in South Bend. It's like, no, there's something else going on here. And Murphy just won't tell her mom. I thought the simplest thing would have just been like, okay, Jess is missing and I'm trying to help find her. But then it's like, if you tell her that, then your mom's going to start asking questions about what's going on that front. So it's like, you can't tell part of that story without eventually having to tell all of it. So I get why Murphy's like, it's just like, no. And it's so interesting that, like, Murphy turned this whole thing into, like, her mom controlling her thing. Because, well, her mom is kind of controller in this regard of, like, right, I'm stopping the car. I'm not going anywhere further until you tell me what's what. And so, why the cops saying you're associated with murder? She's like, I have no idea, Mom. I have no idea what that's all about. So, there is an element of, when you look at Murphy's perspective, I can see why she would think her mom is controlling, because it's like, oh, you had me homeschool, you picked out my house, you picked out my apartment, like, and Murphy making it seem like this is my, you don't know me, like, this is me being free-reined and stuff like that, which is like such a weird time considering you're on the run from the cops to be like trying to take your stand of independence and stuff like that. But I guess it's like her mom makes her feel more disabled than she ever has, because once again, that's why, like, she liked Felix. It's like, Felix you talk like you rag on me, like I rag on you, but you never deal with, like, you never, like, oh, you were never nice to me or just mean, like, you never let my disability, like, ever, like, hinder, like, the situation between us. Like, we were legitimately frenemies and then became actual legitimate friends despite everything. But it's like, for her mom's a personification of someone just, like, coddling her entire life. It's like, you make me feel even more disabled, but, like, I can do more than you give me credit for. I don't need you to be there controlling every facet of my life. But it's also understandable. It's like, you're her little girl. She loves you. She wants to protect you. Even being like, let me get some food in your belly. And so ultimately, her mom, like, being there for, like, touching her face, is like, you always done that since I was a little kid. She's like, you're my little girl, so of course, you know, old habits die hard. And that moment, Murphy broke down, because it was just like, all right, Mom, fine. And she told her mom everything. I was like, you shouldn't have done it, because even Jess inside her head was like, don't. Which, once again, it's a little bit of who Jess would be in those circumstances, but also her subconscious being like, probably saying, like, this is what Jess would say potentially in a situation, but it's like, don't drag your mom into this. Like, it's already bad enough all the people that have constantly gotten dragged into this whirlwind of your situation. Do not drag Joy into this. And she does by telling Joy the truth, because your mom was only going to respond one way. She was going to do whatever it takes to protect you, which involves turning to Josh, because she thinks Josh is the better option. Granted, it's like, Josh is going to put me away forever. It's like, yeah, but that's better than you being dead. So it's like, of course your mom is going to take that. Like, you through the entirety of everything. She started with the Tyson thing and just how we got here. Like, you basically filled her in on 3 seasons of stuff. Like, back to back to back to back to back. It's like all that was like sparse thrown at her at once, which interestingly enough, we've been slowly but surely on this ride. You basically told your mom all that went down probably in a couple minutes. So of course she's going to hyperventilate and freak out and just be worried and scared to death about everything that's going on, especially knowing like, wait, Jesse's gone missing. That could happen to you because she didn't know about all of this. So calls up Josh. They're waiting at the house for them. I was wondering, like, whether Joy would change her mind at the last minute, but it's like, of course she would. Why would she change her mind when her daughter's life is potentially in danger? So, you know, it's only because it's like she didn't turn off the navigation and it kept being like, oh, police ahead. And Murphy's like, why are the police in their house? Did you set me up? It's like, I'm just doing what's best for you. They get in a car accident and Murphy used this as an opportunity to slip away. And lo and behold, ends up in a dude's room and it's like, oh, Murphy? And I'm like, is that? And she says, Jarrett. I'm like, yeah. That Jarrett, her mom had mentioned earlier in the episode, because she was like, all right, trying to figure out where she was. That little kid being like, you're on this. He said, okay, cool. I was like, hey, you're about to befriend another kid. You're about to get mixed up in your shenanigans. But it's like, nah, just pointed her in the right direction. But her mom immediately knew, like, the moment it came there, like, oh. Which I think is so interesting, because I was thinking about Superman and Lois recently, like, the whole get out of my face thing. Like, Joy had that moment when the guy was like, I don't know if she's like, get out of my face now. I'm freaking out because I don't know where my daughter is. But Jerry ended up helping her, even slipping away inside of a garage was pretty smart. But it's like, right, like he's reluctant to help her. Even her being like, yeah, come here, give me a hug. I'm like, oh, that's sweet. But immediately my brain was like, yeah, this situation is going to get misconstrued. I just know, I'm like, I get this inkling, because you both have history like that. I'm like, oh, this is going to get weird, isn't it? And ultimately it does. Because it's like, hey, like, help me find all these, like, particular rehab places where people are, like, potentially, let's look for this Patrick. And, you know, it's like, yeah, I didn't do anything with your life. Here you go, manipulating another person, Murphy, by dragging another person into your shenanigans. You drew your mom into it. Now you're drawing Jared into it. It's like, yeah, just tell them, like, I forced you. It's like, that's going to be pretty hard, because you're going to be like, wait, because the argument is going to be like, are you telling me a blind woman threatened you? Because they were there. It's like, what, she have a gun on you? We saw her. It didn't look like she had any gun or any weaponry on her, so how did she threaten you? It's probably not going to go well for him. To be fair, who cares? Because he kind of made a move on Murphy. Because the moment he was like, oh, I'm going to slide over, I was like, let's stop here. He started kissing her, and that's creepy enough. I was like, I thought it was like a unzip my pants, like, oh, we should, I figured it was supposed to lead to some fooling around or something, but I'm like, it's about to get creepy the moment he's looking around. He's like, oh, let me pull over. I was like, oh, don't be a sleazeball. Don't be, and she's like, what are you doing? Don't, like, put your tongue in my, he's like, I thought this was like, it's like, yeah, I figured he was looking at it as like oh yeah, like, all this stuff, you bringing up history, being like, oh, I'm such a good guy, and how, oh, like, I took your virginity and stuff like that. So it's like, yeah, and it's like, oh, I was like, dude, you were so close to being cool. You were okay. And he's just like, you made it weird. You made it creepy. And he's just like, get out. And she's like, what? That is expressly like a, wait, because I won't bang you on the side of the road, you're kicking me out your car. You won't help me. And I told you that this is about, that is kind of messed up too. I told you this is about my missing best friend, and you're using this as an opportunity to try and get laid? He's like, yeah, you've done this before me before. She's like, oh, because I slept with you over and over and over again? Yeah, I'm sure that was hell. But that's also the thing of like, you can kind of use sex as a weapon sometimes. Like, it can be like physically and emotionally manipulative. You can be in certain cases. So I can see, I'm not justifying his moves or anything. Like, I just think it's so crazy that under these circumstances, he tried to throw that out there to justify it. Like, it's probably a thing of like, maybe Murphy used sex to manipulate him like that in high school. That's apples to oranges. Like, this isn't, whatever that may have been, that doesn't make what you're doing right now okay, and doesn't justify it. So, because at the same time that's all going down, Darnell's trying to like do things, you know, he's like, you know, me and Sarah, but she's like, I can't do that. Like, I'm sorry, because we both know how this would play. He's like, yeah, you know where I am if you ever change your mind. So he's trying to get a new identity for Trey, which I love that when Trey does get his new identity, everything, he's like, oh, like, let me use this as an opportunity to look into this old Jennifer thing. And I'm like, even Darnell's like, what are you doing? And it's just like, no, I'm going to do this. Because it's like, Sarah and everything didn't work out, but Trey was like, what, you slept with her one time? It's like, oh, shut up, whatever. He's like, all right, let's get down to the, like, identity thing after I beat this level. But then like him offering to look into this, I like that he got dragged into it because it's like, right, I've been presented this opportunity, so let me look into this Jennifer thing. All right, here's even more money. It's like, cool. Oh yeah, Jennifer never actually gave me the idea, because it's like, oh yeah, I got the idea a few months ago. It's like, no, Jennifer's been missing years, for like 10 years. So it's like, yeah, I recently, her brother handed it in. I was like, dude. I was like, so that's what I brought up before. Like, people are thinking Murphy's like reaching. I think she's telling the truth. Like, it might be a thing of like her brother, like something went down. Like I said, either like her brother or like her uncle at the very least, like might have done something and it might have gotten covered up. And then maybe her brother was a witness to it. And maybe that's why he's in rehab, because he's been struggling with it. And he was told to keep quiet about it. Because it is interesting that he would give her, like, sell her ID now of all times. Why not years ago? Because I guess that scene we saw, I guess we do know that the original Jennifer is dead. Like, I guess I don't know why that didn't click in my head, but like, yeah, that flashback we saw was of her being murdered. So, like I said, her so-called uncle, I think it actually legitimately was him, and or maybe it was someone else. Like, who would have the motive to kill her and why? It seemed like it might be part of something bigger of like, wait, something happened. And because I don't think that was her brother. Maybe it was, but if it could be her brother who's after Jess, because if it is, like, he's in rehab right now, so I don't think he would have had time. I mean, we don't know when he went into rehab, but like it definitely leads to like, it's probably a thing of like she was witness to like something else, a big crime, and he got rid of her, because I think even at the time she was like, please, almost like, I won't say anything to anyone. I'm sorry what I saw, but it's like, it doesn't seem like it's as personal. It might be a thing of he had her ID the entire time and he needed some money to score some drugs or something, so he sold her identity. Maybe that could be what that is. Like I said, it could just be like he's a witness to something. He just kept his mouth shut the entire time. We'll have to wait and see on that front. But the fact is, and I love it's like, right, let me get your phone. I got to try and call Murphy, mine. It was saved in my number, phone, and everything. And it's like, oh, you only slept with her once. He was like, Darnell throwing that back in Trey's face. He was like, I actually slept with her. Because even I was like, yeah, actually, he slept with her twice. And he says, it's like, yeah, I slept with her twice, but I get your points. I love that. I love Trey's demeanor and everything. That actor, he does such a good job with Trey, because I like Trey's demeanor. It's like, I just love that he's becoming like, a bigger recurring character this season. I like that he's kind of more a part of this, like Darnell is. I like that he's kind of filling that role, because he was just obviously a smaller part last season, but I like that he's kind of got a bigger role this season. But so all the while this is all happening, like, we are having like Josh, Sarah, and Jean all like tracking Murphy down. I love how they go to it in reverse, because they go to Jennifer's mom first, then they go to the uncle, but the uncle's like, oh, I'll tell you what, I'll tell you where she went next. It's like, oh, really? Yeah, she went to Jennifer's mom's. It's like, right. So we actually went to this in reverse, so we have no idea where she's going next. Joy ended up being their next lead, but that kind of didn't pan out. And even them being like, she's like Houdini. Like, she was literally in the palm of her hands, and Jean's like, yeah, like, phew, and she's gone. And it's like, yeah, it is kind of crazy how that, because even Murphy was like, yeah, they think I'm some kind of criminal mastermind. She's not. And it's just, but it is kind of crazy, like, how she's just like super lucky. I mean, they were literally within inches of grabbing her, and before like Jarrett took off in the car. I'm just like, crazy hijinks, it's crazy. But Felix is going through all these books with Max about trying to look through law to try and give themselves a defense, which I love. Leslie went to work, but then she came back and was like, yeah, I had to help you because I couldn't focus on it. It's like, really? You left work because of that? It's like, well, why didn't you say self-defense? It's like, well, we were peddling drugs for her at the time, so okay. So obviously self-defense would be like the main thing that but they'd have to have some kind of witness to kind of verify the circumstances. Was one witness not too keen on helping us, and that would be Sam, which I love. Leslie's kind of spinning it, but the moment, she probably shouldn't have mentioned her last name, because it's like, Belle, Felix, huh? So it's like, right, you're going to be helping my brother and helping yourself in the long run. It's like, we're going to paint the narrative of like, right, you had to survive, you had to do whatever you had to do to survive, so like, you kind of had no choice. We can like get rid of the arguments about like, oh, you apparently killed Vincent because your fingerprints. It's like, there's a possibility you've been in that car in the past 5 years, and she was like, nope. Well, let's say you were, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So it's like, think about it. And she's like, I'll think about it. Felix, being too nervous, called it up and screwed the whole pooch. maybe Sam would have been more willing to. The fact is that she even considered, like, she had to think about it and not an immediately yes, because it would have at least helped her circumstances. Like, to be fair, why would she help out Murphy? Because you guys got away with killing Nia. Like, he tried to paint, like, he didn't even have to get to that point. It's like, I thought she was stringing you along. I thought she was going to manipulate you, because it's like, no, this is all about revenge. Murphy's not the one to pull the trigger. Jess is, but she did everything she could to protect Jess, so... Because that's where my immediate thought was, like, it had to be, like, because Sam wasn't going to let that go. Because Felix didn't realize, like, Nia meant the world to Sam. Because he's like, yeah, we're all victims. He's like, no, you weren't victims. You murdered her. I'm not going to let you get away with it. You know what? Screw that. She seemed like she was actually considering it, but the moment she's like, oh, you're going to come at me with that? No, bump that. You know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, you trying to play the role of the victim, I hope you all get busted. When Murphy does, I'm going to be waiting here to basically kill her when I get an opportunity when she's in jail with me. And Felix was like, well, shit, I made things worse. I should have left it alone, but because I got too antsy about it myself, I screwed the pooch. Granted, I felt like Sam was always going to... There's always a strong possibility she would have leaned towards no, but the fact is she was thinking about it. Felix is called, like, put a nail in a coffin to a mega no, but it definitely seemed like there could have been room for a possible she'll help out, but I don't know. There was always going to be something that was going to tilt that towards it. Felix just heavily tilted it in the against them side of things, but there was always going to be something that would flip that way. Because it's like self-preservation. I'd rather rot away in jail for the rest of my life than help you guys. If I can get the opportunity to get revenge for Nia, icing on the cake, you know? So, because we still haven't dealt with the full aftermath of, like, the cartel that were sent. Because obviously all the cartel people that were sent after Josiah are dead. I'm curious if before Home Dude died, the one who survived, who tried to pull the bullet out, but ended up dying, but Leslie's gun's there, which, once again, that's going to screw her over. Whether she ends up having to go on the run, too, is going to definitely be interesting if that ends up being a case, but, yeah. So, but, I'm just curious because the cartel is like a background thing for now. Not unless they end up having to turn to the cartel for protection. Once again, we could get more and more Ozark-like, or even Breaking Bad-like, continuing down this route. But we'll see. Because that's why I'm still like, I don't see how you find your way out of this situation. Even if they do, like, I think that gun, Leslie's gun, probably isn't going to come into play until the season finale. The season finale is probably when they're going to drop the hammer on that, and that's going to be a big thing setting up into season 4, I think. But we'll kind of get there when we get there, see if that ends up happening or whether that ends up happening in the next 3 episodes. It is kind of crazy to think, like, already, like, a lot of, maybe just because of just the timing and everything, but it feels like, well, because this is one of those shows that doesn't take many breaks in between. It's only taken, like, 1 break so far, and there isn't going to be an episode next week, so it's taking another one, but then, like, I think the next 3 episodes are back-to-back. Not the same night, obviously, but week to week is what I'm talking about. But, like, this season feels like it flew by so fast. To be fair, most of the shows I end up watching on this network end up being on the longer end anyway, so maybe that's, like, contributing to that, because most shows I watch take longer breaks and are on the longer end, you know? So maybe that's a contributing factor, but, because this show's been consistently 13 episodes each season, so... But it feels like the season flew by so fast, it feels like. But, regardless, tangents and all that aside, you also had this situation with, Sarah and Jean. I always felt like that was where that was going. I would have never suspected the Sarah and Darnell thing. Didn't see that coming, but it makes sense just because of the whole him and Jules thing. And, like, obviously that was back in season 1 before, obviously, she got murdered. So... I don't know, just it's interesting. But like Gene almost kisses her, like I think their lips meet kind of meet, but it's like, oh, I'm sorry. She's like, no, it's okay. He's like, no, it's actually not. I am your boss, because even I was like, yeah, that would be like a inappropriate thing. You're 2 consistent adults, sure, but there's still too much of a power dynamic because you are her boss. It could get into a murky area. Plus, it would also screw her over when it comes to work, because everyone would be like, oh, you guys are like, oh, no wonder she got the job. No wonder you've taken her under your belt type of thing. Like, it kind of skew a lot of people's views. But he's like, no, I'm good. And he's just awkward about it. He's like, I'm just going to go. He's like, do you want to go to, you need someone to take you to drop you off to the train? He's like, that sounds romantic. I'm going to, no, night. It's like, night. And then she's like, I'm drunk and I'm probably making a bad decision, but she's texting like Darnell. So I'm like, okay. obviously Trey and Murphy, and you're like, oh boy, because it's like, right, he's there to kind of console her. Like, all we have to do is, I guess, we'll have to wait for the brother to come out of the rehab, because like there's no one at those rehabs will give us that information about whether or not he's a patient there, so we won't be able to visit him or whatever. Why don't you just be like, oh, I guess it's a thing of, you would have to be family anyway, so it's not like casual people. Like, even if you're like, oh, we're here to see Patrick, it's like you can't do that anyway because you have to be family to kind of see him. I mean, I think you'd have to be. I don't think there's like random people, like, even if you're like, or a family friend or something, I don't think you'd have that possibility, especially because you set it up of you asking if he's there. Like, maybe you can worm your way around it if you hadn't asked that beforehand, because the lady was like, wait, are you the one that was asking earlier? Murphy's like, no. I'm like, that's a super convincing no, Murphy. But obviously she's stressed out and she's panicking, and then immediately like starts kissing on Trey. I'm like, don't go back to your thing of just kind of like, which immediately, like Jess had brought up earlier, obviously her subconscious being like, oh, if only you had someone you could sleep with right now, just kind of, because that's her way of dealing with things. And I'm like, oh boy, someone comes and knocking, I was like, who's it going to be? I did not expect it to be who it was, because it's like, oh, it's Darnell's phone here. It's like, all right, I was like, oh, please don't. I was like, I thought it was going to be someone like dare to kill them or something like that. And lo and behold, who it is, it's Sarah. I'm like, yo! And Trey's like, who are you? I was like, but it took me a second, because I was like, oh no, because she's here to get Murphy. But then I was like, oh, but you're also stupid too, Michael, because obviously she's after Trey as well. So like the two people she's hunting are literally in the same room together. It's like, man, did that just fall in her lap. So I was like, cool, but you like Darnell, so are you going to let this slide? It's like, letting Trey slide once is one thing, but it's like, right, Trey's still here. Now Murphy's here too. It's like, dude, the universe threw this in your lap. It's like, am I really just going to let this go just because of how I feel about Darnell? Like, us liking each other? Dude. I was like, that's the double, like, woo. That's all you can say about that. It's like, man, did that just like fall apart super quickly in that regard. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us. Like I said, there is no new episode next week. There will be one the week after next, so do keep that in mind. But I'm excited to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.